roughly half want to leave. And, you know, there's really no middle position. You either leave, you're either in,
yeah. And a necessary evil to solve this once and for all, a necessary evil to answer the European thing, and also maybe even the two-party system.
Well, the two-party system could change. There could be a new party. But, you know, you asked, have we been here with a constitutional crisis? Now, this is worrying because we have had in this country really big crises, like in 1936 between the two world wars. The monarch wanted to marry the American Wallis Simpson, Edward VIII, and that was not acceptable to people here in Parliament, and he left. He abdicated, and a new King, George VI, came in, who saw Britain through the Second World War. Major crisis, but it had an easy solution. And then there was a Suez crisis in 1956 when, for, you know, a week or two, this house was absolutely, I mean, desperate. Imagine a week or two of real crisis in there, but then it was solved with a new prime minister coming along and a new policy. This hasn't gone on for a week or two. It's gone on for 3 years.
This is series on steroids.
Absolutely, and worse. I mean, this is, I think, the biggest crisis we've had since 1688, over 300 years ago, when again we replaced the monarch and had a new settlement. It's the worst crisis between the battle between the Catholics and the Protestants after the Reformation, and that lasted 2 centuries. Okay. This one's gone on for 60 years, could go on for it's not going to be over, not over tonight.
Sir Anthony, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, Christian.
Okay, we want to give you a unique perspective to Brexit from our colleague Aulia Atrophy. For 12 years, he lived in the northern English city of Hull after he claimed asylum in the UK to escape the Taliban.
2/3 of people who voted in the Brexit referendum in Hull voted to leave the EU, so Aulia returned to Hull to find out what effect the vote has had on the city that was his home.
Hull, a once thriving fishing and port city in the north of England. I came to Hull in the year 2000 as an asylum seeker from Afghanistan, fleeing the Taliban. I lived here for 12 years. I have now returned to find out whether the city that took me and so many others in is still a welcoming place for foreigners. In a pub on the outskirts, I asked some Leave voters if an immigrant like me would still be welcome in the city after Britain leaves the EU.
You've got the if you have the skills, if you have what we need in this country, then you are most welcome.
Hull is a very friendly city, always has been. And if people work hard and become part of the community, they have nothing to fear.
Once we've achieved a clean Brexit, we need to rebuild our country, and we will rebuild our country. Anybody who doesn't want to take part of that, the port, the airport, the gateway, the door is over there. Use it, leave. Because none of these people were invited. They all asked to come.
I met up with some old friends down at Hull Mosque, where the mood was one of trepidation amongst some worshippers.
We are seeing an increase of attacks sort of against minority groups. Particularly against Islam. So I feel post-Brexit is only going to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, people are using that as a platform now. People are using that as get out of our country. You're going to be going out of country anyway, so that's already happening now.
Next, I visited parts of Hull which have been revitalized by recent immigration. Alijan. I have known Alijan, who is also from Afghanistan, for 18 years. He says he fears for his pizza business after Brexit.
Yeah, we're going to lose most of our customers, and quite a lot of people who here is from European countries like Latvia, Poland, Lithuania.
Nuzika from Hungary works for Alijan's takeaway. She says businesses will struggle to replace any European workers who leave because of Brexit.
Most of the shops are already starting to close down, like just in our street. Many shops are closed. I don't think so many English people like to wake up 5 o'clock in the morning to start to work at 6 and get minimum wage.
Since I've returned to Hull, I've found old friends and a city that's been changed by austerity, immigration, and the Brexit referendum. I feel it's more divided and more uncertain than the place that took me in 19 years ago. I left hoping that the people of Hull can find a way of resolving their differences and moving forward together. Awliya Atrafi, BBC News, Hull.
Yes, as I say, our society is a reflection of what is going on across the road. Now, 2 weeks ago, the world was shocked by the deadly attack carried out on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, but for security officials, it was another stark reminder of the threats we face and where resources should be devoted.
Here in the US, that job mainly falls to the Department of Homeland Security. And for 4 years, Janet Napolitano headed the agency. Well, now she has a new book asking, how safe are we? I spoke to her earlier. Just 2 weeks ago, we had that awful attack in Christchurch, New Zealand, on Muslims. Just how big is the global threat from extreme right-wing terrorism and white supremacists, and have we underestimated it?
I think it's a growing threat, and I think to some degree we have underestimated it. And I think the horrible attacks in New Zealand maybe raised it in the public's consciousness. Facebook announced that it is removing all white nationalist postings from its website. And when people put the words in to search for that kind of material, they'll be diverted to an anti-hate group. I think that's a good move, and probably a little late, but a good move in the right direction.
You say in your book that one of the qualities you need to do the job as Homeland Security Secretary is a dark imagination. Where does your imagination lead you at night?
When I was secretary, I used to do what-ifs in my mind. What if there were an attack not on one shopping mall, but on several shopping malls all at the same time? What if there were actually a pandemic affecting the United States and indeed the world? How would we mobilize our healthcare resources, our government response, and so forth? So it really required you to really do what-ifs in your mind.
But which one do you think is the biggest threat now?
You know, I actually think the biggest threat to the globe is global warming and climate change and all the impacts that it has. It has impacts in terms of extreme weather events. So in the United States, we've seen more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more wildfires out west that have caused a lot of death and destruction. But also when you think about the globe, it affects global migration patterns. And so we have a global migration really from south to north. You have areas of the world that are subjected to extreme drought that's killed local agriculture, local markets, killed jobs, so that now you have more jobless, hopeless young men who are ripe for recruitment by terrorist organizations. Those are kind of all of the impacts that a warming planet is causing.
What about the cyber threat? Because you talk a lot about that in your book. It seems that America was somewhat blindsided by Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign. How difficult is it to defend against that?
Well, it's going to take a greater unity of effort and more leadership than we currently have. U.S. elections are controlled by local elected officials, county recorders, state secretaries of state. They all need to be brought together. There need to be national standards in terms of the actual machinery of the election, so we have confidence in the integrity of the vote. And then, you know, we need to really do a better job educating the population about how to critically review the material they find on social media, because the Russians, they were hacking and they were planning misleading and destructive stories on social media, all designed to disadvantage Hillary Clinton and advantage President Trump. We need greater confidence and control, as it were, to make sure that doesn't happen with 2020.
Janet Napolitano, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
You know, Christian, she spoke very movingly in her book about the way Americans came together after the 9/11 attack.